When you see these loops hanging off the edge of your fabric, a lot of people think this is a tension problem, but it's actually not. We're working on the Serger ProFinish Serger, and it's actually what your cutting width is set at. So we're real zoomed in here because I want to show you how this dial here can be adjusted to make your stitches look perfect. So first off, this changes based on how thick of fabric you're working on. So this one being just a single layer of a cotton fabric versus this one being a double layer of almost like a thick flannel are going to need different knife adjustments. So don't think of it as stitch width. I know with our sewing knowledge, that's the first thing that comes to mind. But what's happening is as you're cutting off part of the edge, if the knife is moved in closer to the needles than necessary, more fabric is being cut off and there's nothing or as much fabric for the overlock to sit on and kind of just be kissing that nice little edge there. This is what you're really looking for. It's just a nice flat finish with the upper looper and lower looper kind of kissing that edge. So here's what happens. You will find that if you can move this dial, you will see the knife will actually be moving towards the needles or away from the needles. Keep in mind that knives are spring loaded, so when you're going away from the needles, you can actually just kind of push up against this knife to kind of release the pressure, so you can be moving it out to a further setting. So as I move it here, you can see it kind of coming closer to those needles. So if you have thinner fabric, you cut more off, there's not as much filling in that area. On the vice versa side, if you're working on something a little bit thicker or fluffier, where the fabric's actually going to fill in, it's going to expand upward and fill in those areas. But on the other hand, if you have your knife too far away from your needles when you're working on thicker fabric, there's not enough room for the fabric to actually kind of be encased in the overlock stitch. So what's going to happen is you'll often see your fabric kind of tunnel or curve or make the stitches not be nice and even. They might try to separate them, and so they're kind of, instead of nice orderly rows of threads, you will see some that are a little bit bigger or some that are a little bit squished together, or maybe it might roll your tensions to the opposite side because again the fabric is kind of cupped because there's too much being pushed into that small area. So if you think about that, if you were to move your knife in, cut off a little bit more fabric, you'll notice that there's just enough fabric to fit in that overlock stitch and it will lay completely flat. So that's the goal, laying completely flat plus not having too much loops hanging off the edge of the fabric. So is there anything wrong with this stitch? It just doesn't look as pretty, but it is overlocking this edge. Those loops will and could get caught on something and get pulled. So yes, you do want to make it so they're not so hanging out there. Just remember, not a tension issue, it is a cutting width issue. Once again, kind of find it, you can move it all the way in, all the way out, and then just kind of find a happy middle, and that's a great place to start as you start to experiment with the fabric that you're working with.